Hey everyone, welcome to the CyberHub Engage podcast. I'm your host, James Azar. Make sure you follow us on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and any other social media that censors anyone that says anything that they don't like politically, that are out there. We got an awesome episode for you guys today. Back from Israel in the studio. It's the week of 4th of July, July 3rd. One of my favorite weeks, the 4th of July, one of my favorite holidays, because it symbolizes that we are the longest lasting democracy on the planet. I don't know if you knew this or not, Carl, but an average constitution in the world lasts 17 years. Ours is heading over 200 and some odd years. So we're not the standard, we're the exception. As a country. And I got Carl Scaffidi, right?
Yep.
The CISO for Baker Donelson, one of the largest law firms in the country.
Yep, we're AmLaw 100 law firm.
Top 100.
Yep.
Baker Donelson here have a great presence in Atlanta, Georgia, and Carl's the CISO in charge of making sure that none of those secretive contracts get out there. We're going to be right back with Carl, but before that, let's get a quick message from one of our supporters, Get Smart Eye. I want to give a quick shout out to our sponsor, Get Smart Eye. That's Get Smart Eye, like your eye, EYE.com. It's a new security company that's focused on your privacy. How many of you guys have eyes around watching your screens, your phones, your tablets, no matter where you are? It can be your own office, an airport, a train station, a co-working space, and even a coffee shop, right? But there's some documents and some information that really needs to stay away from prying eyes. That's where Get Smart Eye comes in. They're using the latest biometric technology to give you complete control over the documents you send and who sees them. Whether you're viewing them yourself or sending them for someone else to view them, the Get Smart Eye technology ensures that whoever's seeing it is the right person. And should someone who shouldn't see it grab a look at it, it gets the document to disappear and won't reopen it until it verifies the identity of the person you sent it to. So to get more information, go to getsmarteye.com/James. Again, that's getsmarteye.com/James. Again, getsmarteye.com/James. Awesome. So we're back, Carl. Thanks for being here. We've had to reschedule this a few times. You've had a great few weeks. We were obviously in Israel, and now we're here, 4th of July. Happy 4th of July.
Yes, thank you. Happy 4th of July to you too.
Very exciting, very exciting time. I love 4th of July. You barbecuing? You doing anything special?
Maybe, we'll see. Trying to learn our new kids' routine right now.
Because you got a newborn.
Yes.
Well, did you guys get him like a 4th of July onesie?
Yeah, I'd leave that up to my wife. She's got plenty. He'll probably have about 3 outfits during the day.
He'll have like a little Thomas Jefferson, maybe a John Hancock outfit.
Yeah.
Did you know that there were 56 people that signed our Declaration of Independence? I did not know this. I was listening to a podcast yesterday that was all about our Independence Day. I think it was Charlie Kirk. Was it Charlie Kirk? No, it wasn't Charlie Kirk. I think it was Ben Shapiro. It was the Ben Shapiro Sunday Conversation, and he had a guy on who's a historian, and he says that most Americans can only name 4 people that are signed on the Declaration of Independence when there's 56, and he talks about the other 52 people that no one's ever heard of,
right,
and where they came from, and just everything that went into thinking about writing the Declaration of Independence and how it applies in today's political climate that's so toxic. And it was fascinating. I was listening to it yesterday on my flight back to Atlanta. It was just like, wow, this is like, typically I listen to a podcast, fall asleep. Not this time. I was like, I need to take notes. Like, this is good. So shout out. But Carl, thanks for being with us today. How did you start your career in cybersecurity?
In college, I was a computer engineering major, minored in security technology. Always had an interest in security. First half of my career, I spent on the consulting side. Traveled a lot, saw a lot of different things. I've worked in about 100 companies. So you see the good, you try and avoid the bad. And then I had an opportunity to build a program at Baker Donelson. It wasn't it was something that needed a lot of improvement. It was fairly light, a lot of processes. There was no dedicated security function. Policies were kind of just slapped down from a consulting engagement that came in 5 years ago. So there's a lot of things to formalize it, a lot of things to build it up, and then get it in front of the firm to make it a firm-wide program rather than just something that was viewed as a technical control within security or within IT.
It seemed like most law firms almost view security as an IT function rather than its own dedicated function, which is what it needs to be, right? Mm-hmm. How have you seen cybersecurity really evolve? Because in your previous roles, you were on the consulting side working with, over 50, 60 companies in your role, and security has obviously evolved over the years. Mm-hmm. How have you seen some of the changes in security happen?
It's still at the basis pretty basic, right? And I think a lot of people still get that wrong, which is obviously an issue, but that's why we have so many things that we see today in the paper every day. There's breaches all over the place. I think it's starting to move where there's more internal engagement from the stakeholders. They're starting to realize that it's an organization-wide function. It's not just a subset of that IT culture. It's going to involve every different department. It's got, marketing, it's got finance, it's got technology with IT as well, but depending on your organization, what vertical you're in, everything has to have some form of security baked into it.
It's funny because I think one of the mistakes and one of the learning curves in security is the fact that people silo security like they silo IT, sales, and marketing rather than spread it vertically mm-hmm. across the entire organization. We're starting to kind of see that change, but law firms, being a CISO for, one of the top 100 law firms in the country, you guys have a lot of sensitive data. Most agreements, I got to tell you a funny story. So I was flying back from New York in April, and I was at LaGuardia, last flight of the day back to Atlanta. The lady in front of me in the line was a lawyer. You know how I know she was a lawyer? Because I could see everything she was doing.
Absolutely.
And she was doing a settlement for Wells Fargo. That was confidential. You know how I know? Because it said confidential Wells Fargo settlement. And I looked at that and I went, wow. So mind you, if I was an evil actor or an opportunist, I right then and there know Wells Fargo is about to do a settlement for multi-millions of dollars with an organization. Mm-hmm. I can shorten the stuff. I can leak it. I grabbed my phone and videotaped behind her for the sake of seeing if she would notice me videotaping. Nothing. She was so zoned into answering the email and just going over everything that she paid no attention to everything around her. And I was reading, I can tell you everything about the settlement. Now I won't because we're on the air and I don't feel like getting a cease and desist from Wells Fargo or from the law firm, right? But that's a challenge. I mean, that honestly is your role in an organization like a law firm, because you guys are an integral part of the supply chain. And for most organizations, you're an outside counsel. You deal mm-hmm. with a lot of very sensitive data. How does that kind of adjust your perspective in security?
Well, I mean, every bit of data is sensitive, so you have to go to your data classifications. We have financial data, we have medical data, right. We have intellectual property data, you name it. So even though we're not a multi-billion-dollar company, we have the data of multi-billion-dollar companies, right, that we have to protect. So when you talk about software or third-party supply chain, things like that, we kind of sit in the middle of it because we're downstream from our clients, and then we're also upstream from different partners that we use to enable us to practice law and secure that data and things like that. So we definitely need to make sure that we're doing things the right way and we're identifying our data correctly and also protecting it, because nobody's really going to be talking to a law firm unless they're giving you some type of sensitive data. Right. I mean, who's going to pay those rates just because they feel like it?
No one calls his lawyer and says, hey, I'm sending you
yeah, this public document, right? Read over it and then get back to me, right?
It's fascinating for me because you hear more law firms are specifically targeted, right? And it's typically always to go after a specific piece of information that's very lucrative.
Mm-hmm.
Do you view that in your organizations? Do you look at the different practices within Baker Donelson to kind of, not only data classifications, but you go, hey, these guys do IP or settlements. Their data is far more crucial than, let's say, someone who's doing, an MSA or just a standard operating contract?
We don't really sit there and say, okay, this is the type of data that is more valuable, because it's all valuable. It's all sensitive. So as, security, we need to enable the business, so the data also needs to be able to flow. As our product is really knowledge and expertise of our people. So we need to enable them to work and to, continue to practice law while also not restricting them too far. It's not really identifying, okay, this piece of data is different than this one. Obviously, if there's some type of regulation or law around it, it's going to have a different classification level. But it's really, the data of our clients is going to be protected at, at least a baseline level, depending on what else needs to be layered on top of that.
You brought up a point that you started building the program for Baker Donelson. Obviously, budget in law firms is tight. They bill by the hour. I mean, everyone thinks lawyers make a lot of money. The lawyers make money. The firms, I always like to say that law firms are like the mob, right? The guys on top are making the 10% kickbacks. And they're collecting from the large pot, and then everyone's kind of billing across, and you're not a billable function. You're an expense.
Right.
What tips would you give to upcoming security professionals who are going into an organization with a very tight budget? Because you've done it.
Mm-hmm.
So what are some of your best practices, some of the secret sauce that you can share with us?
Yeah, I mean, it comes down to people, process, technology. You got to have some people. You can't do it on your own. Sometimes you see people, it's like, oh, I'm a CISO function of one, but then you have your compliance department, you have your engineering department. So you're really leveraging other people to do stuff. But as a dedicated security team, having that in our department, I found success finding people who are looking to problem solve and are going to be good team players, because we're not going to get a bunch of people. We're not going to get really even enough, especially with deep expertise in certain areas that are really going to be able to do stuff. So everybody's got to be a little bit of a chameleon, right? They have to be able to adapt. They have to be able to share information. They have to be able to continue to do things efficiently. So when you take the people, then the next portion is the process. And as a security leader or a CISO, I mean, that's on you. You create the process.
Right.
You don't need technology to create process. You don't even really need people, but you can create workflows. You can do different things and say, here's how you follow this process. And then when you get to the technology portion of it, the definition of technology is a capability given by the practical application of knowledge. So that knowledge comes from the process you create and the people that you have. Technology is a force multiplier. It helps you work more efficiently. It helps you work more quickly when you have the right people in place and you've created the right processes to use that technology. So really it boils down to, how do you take all three of those things and make them as efficient as possible, and that's how you deal with a tight budget.
People always talk of budget. They always correlate it to technology, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't have enough money. I've got to put you, we hear it from, vendors. They say, oh, I've got a POC with this guy for 2027 because of his budget concerns or limitations or whatnot. Do you find that there's a need within the cybersecurity industry to really start addressing cybersecurity, essentially cost, and make it more effective? I mean, make the product cheaper, more affordable, kind of a subscription model almost?
I don't know, because that kind of takes away the free market a little bit, right? How are you going to regulate prices?
Well, I don't think you should regulate prices, right? I feel like there's, when I was in Israel, as we were at Cyber Week, and we didn't spend a lot of time in the conference, we spent probably about half a day there, really.
Mm-hmm.
I was talking to different vendors, and everyone's talking about how they're great and how awesome they are, and I won't tell you that I fell asleep during the vendor presentations in the main plenary before Netanyahu spoke, but there are pictures of me snoring with headphones in my ears, passed out. And I found that everyone now is talking about orchestration and the need to go from 20 vendors to 5. Get 5 good ones that really get the job done for you, and don't get 20. And I agree with that. Finally, finally we're having the right conversation.
Right.
Get 5 very good vendors that can really support you rather than having 20, 30, 40, 50. I know one CISO that has 174 vendors.
Right.
Those are insane numbers. How do you manage all the... I guarantee you that there's not full implementation there.
Yeah. Yeah, you need to get the stuff that you have right before you start going to look and buy new stuff.
Right.
Depending on where you're going to go with your firm's platforms and agreements and everything like that, there's a lot of things that are built in at the baseline. You need to create the processes around what you have before you start adding those new things. I mean, you could sit there and say, let's go to 5 vendors, but if those 5 vendors don't do what you need it to do, then you might need other stuff. There's different scalability too. Some people are like, okay, well, I can get this, really good tool and it's one of my 5, but it's way beyond what I can even afford. So I got to use 3 smaller ones that do part of that process. And it's all dependent on your strategy. What's your risk profile going to be, and how are you best going to mitigate that risk and treat it with those vendors, as well as also the processes and the people on top of it.
As you're watching technologies evolve, what new cyber technologies you feel like are going to have the most impact on the industry, especially when it comes to, one of the key words I've been hearing, again, when we were in Israel during Cyber Week, was people started talking prevention. Do you believe that there is such a thing as prevention, or are we always going to be stuck in the rut of detection and mitigation?
Yeah, well, I mean, you have to have a certain level of prevention, otherwise the floodgates are wide open,
right?
And you're going to detect everything and never be able to stop it. So, security's moved away from the castle and moat type of model, but you still need that, right? At home, you still have a front door with a lock on it, right? There's still something
fair argument
that's there, right? You're not just letting everything come in that you want, and relying on your home alarm motion detectors. So it's emerging technologies. Again, we have to get the basics right first before we start worrying about the next blinky light. With some of the things in the advancements, you look at AI and machine learning and the marketing and stuff there, and that could be useful. But remember, there's another side too, and that's the attack side.
Right.
They're going to be using the same stuff. So how much of a distinct advantage are you really having if you can get this, machine learning for detection? They're going to start doing machine learning for evasion. So realistically, it's not really that different from how much of an advantage you get. As far as what could emerge, I think it comes down to kind of identity and access management, simplifying that process, making that more efficient, making it so that the people who need the access to stuff can get it, but it's not such a nightmare to organize, to provision and deprovision, and that whole process.
You brought up a very good point, which you kind of go back to the basics. And I like that because I feel like security is always about the basics, right? People go and always want to buy the next shiny thing, but the next shiny thing may not be as effective if you don't have your base. Like you said, if you don't have your front door with a lock on it, chances are people are going to walk in, your alarm's going to go off, but they're already in your house. They've taken your TV and they've walked out.
Exactly.
By the time you've responded, right? Do you think there's a future for passwords?
Now, yes. I mean, how far in the future? I think the way the industry's going, and some of the recent quotes and things from NIST and Microsoft of saying let's get rid of the password, or remove these minimum things. I think it's good ideology, but it's not practical right now. When you move towards authentication, access, and things like that, take kind of the multi-factor authentication model.
Right.
Something something you have, something you are. So the password is something you know. If you take away the thing that you know, which is always going to be a password or a passphrase or something, of that multi-factor triad, you're going to have what? Something you are and something you have. So something you have could be your phone, could be your YubiKey or whatever. Then it comes to something you are. Something you are as a fingerprint or something, a facial recognition. that then delves into the privacy concerns where you're going to have people saying, wait a second, if this is going to identify me based on what I am, where is all that being stored? How's that being protected? How is that then being used for, other potential nefarious needs, or even just not even nefarious, just collecting data about you? So if you're going to get rid of the password, you have to figure out what are the things you're going to use to identify, and then are people going to be comfortable with that identification as something that you are biometrically, or something that is unique to you that you really can't control, like your fingerprint or your eye scan or something like that.
So, interesting thing is when you think of a fingerprint, most devices today have a fingerprint, but fingerprints aren't unique anymore. I mean, the biometric database breach that happened at OPM, and most recently with Border and Custom Protection, CPP, Custom and Border Protection. Sorry, it's kind of showing that biometrics could be possibly manipulated.
Well,
so
I mean,
forth.
anything can be manipulated,
Right?
Right. That's what security is finding the balance, and nothing's going to be ever 100% secure. So how do you make it as difficult as possible to make that able to be compromised? And that's where the detection comes in, right? Can the time that it takes you to detect something be shorter than the time it takes somebody to compromise something?
We hear defense in depth a lot, right? Kind of creating layers of security, making it very difficult to reach, the pot with all the good stuff in it. And if they're getting stuff along the sides, they're just, kind of picking up scraps rather than anything really meaningful. Do you feel like that strategy is going to be effective in the world of AI and machine learning, where, defense in depth is essentially going to be a layered system that the machine can learn and overcome?
Yeah, I mean, it has to be. You have to, have your multiple defensive depths here.
Right.
If, you go towards the machine learning and the AI models and everything, it's always something that is going to be figured out. I mean, machine learning is, based on the data you're given, garbage in,
Right.
garbage out. If you say something's a cat and you feed it 800 pictures of a dog, it's going to start calling a dog a cat. So there's different ways to manage it. There's different ways to defend against it. But I don't think you can sit there and ever say, hey, we're going to have this one single layer and that's what we're going to rely on, because that's going to fail at some point. And then what are you doing? You have nothing left. So you always have to have something as a backup plan.
Attorneys in general are the human factor. Unlike manufacturing, unlike large organizations, an attorney is really billing his human hours. He's a human interacting with other humans, and they're more liable. And I shared the story of that lawyer with Wells Fargo at the airport. How do you train the attorneys to be more vigilant? How do you help them in really understanding some of the risks and some of the proper cyber hygienes? What are some of the tips you would give a lawyer who's kind of watching this, who doesn't work for Baker Donelson, who maybe works for, I don't know, someone else?
Right. Yeah, and I mean, security awareness is going to come down to how do you help people learn?
Right.
How do you get that knowledge, whether they're a lawyer billing, whatever many figures an hour, or, somebody who's, a lower level knowledge worker or anything like that. So basically, you got to figure out how people learn, and different people learn differently. Some people are auditory, some people are visual. Being able to create a program that different people can relate to, and really finding what resonates with them. I found with the lawyers, kind of making it move towards the personal side, helps, where it's like, okay, here's our company's data, right? Here's the client data that's now our data. What if this was your data? What if this is your bank account data and you were doing this at home? This could potentially expose this. This is a risky behavior. Trying to help them understand that in that sense really helps them say, okay, this is how I want to protect the company data, like I would protect it as my own.
Lawyers travel a lot. I am always a firm in one of those where, as I spent the last few weeks traveling, it was very interesting for me to be at airports. So I don't open my laptop. I don't read emails when I'm traveling, when I'm in airports. I don't even take business calls, because I feel like, you can't have a real business conversation when you've got 200 strangers around you. You don't know who they are. Nonetheless, when you're in a foreign country. But I found it very fascinating to see people's cyber hygiene. And a plain example, I tweeted about this and had a really long engagement. I was sitting for a meeting at the event where we're waiting for a speaking engagement to come up. we're in the kind of B2B networking area, and someone left their laptop unattended, charging at a charging station. Unattended.
Did they at least lock it?
Yeah. Well, so the laptop was kind of in the sleeve,
Right.
but they had it out enough to where I could probably stick in a USB, because the USB was like right there. I took a picture. It's on my Twitter page. So for those listening or watching, go to James_Azar1 on Twitter, and you can see it. I took a picture, and then I took a picture of the girl that came about an hour later, an hour that she left her laptop unattended at a cyber conference. At a cyber conference, like of all places.
Yep.
It was that aspect of cyber hygiene. Obviously, attorneys being the fact that a lot of them travel, they're not always working in the office. They can work from home. They can be at the client's facility. Mm-hmm. How do you start to address that hygiene with them?
Yeah, I mean, we have to enable them to do business and to work. And, a lot of that we can't even control if we just said, hey, everybody, here's the process you follow, because it's got to follow how a client wants to work too. So it really comes down to a trusted asset type of model where it's like, okay, here's our assets, and that's defense in depth, right? A computer gets left. Obviously, we want to educate up to a point to say, hey, please don't ever do this. But at some point, somebody's going to get lackadaisical, somebody's going to do it, and that human is going to fail. That's why you have encryption. That's why you have EDR. That's why you have different controls, so that if something like that did happen, you can protect your data. The trusted asset model is something that's controlled by us, so we make sure that it has all our defenses in depth. There's sometimes times where clients want to work a certain way, and we can't use a trusted asset. So that's why we want to use a trusted portal or something like that. So it makes it a trusted container, so that all our data stays within our control, and we let it be accessed depending on how it needs to be, based on what we're looking to do with it and how it needs to move.
When you think of the migration to the cloud, sexy word, hybrid cloud, the cloud model, come on, give me all your data. I'm going to put it on the cloud. There's a almost discount to security when it comes to the cloud, because most people, I feel like, not on the security side, but more on the organizational side, feel like, oh, if it's on the cloud, if it's hosted by Amazon or Azure or Google, they get to essentially, they got to worry about security. We don't have to worry about it. It's a common misconception. How do you kind of deal with that on your aspect, being that most lawyers today operate off the cloud to begin with? They don't store their documents on their computers anymore. Everything's kind of on the cloud to begin with.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really bad with that conception, and I think it's a lot of marketing hype as well as stakeholders within the organization not understanding truly what cloud technology is. As far as moving to the cloud and the risks, you really have to do it right. Right now, if you move to the cloud from an on-prem environment, you don't have an excuse if you get breached. You don't have all this legacy stuff and everything because it is new. And being new, the floor has been raised of what security is. But just because you're not on-prem anymore, it's not a magic elixir. There's still a lot of the similar problems, and you have to make sure you do it right. So it's really about educating stakeholders and making sure that security is on the front end of it, and sitting there and saying, okay, here's our baselines, here's our templates. We're going to create these so that, in our guardrails here, you guys can create things that we know are going to be secure, and then you can go and you can be efficient and you can flow with the work and everything like that, building new stuff.
How do you vet cloud providers on your end? Do you have any ways you specifically look at them, or different environments and so forth?
Yeah, I mean, we're fairly cloud. We're new to the cloud. We're working through, some of the bigger providers, and I've said, look, we're going to have one cloud, right? We can't do multi-cloud. We're too small. I take it back to Herm Edwards and his rule of one, right? You get one cloud. One cloud. Yeah, so we're going to do that. We're going to build our processes because we're not a large enough organization, nor do we need multiple cloud instances. As far as, and the cloud is also a broad term. What is cloud? Is this infrastructure? Is it software? Is it platform? So when we're working in clouds with clients and things like that, we want to put as many controls around it as there, but really we're relying on what the clients want. When it's our cloud and we're serving stuff, that's when we're putting our guidelines in place for how we want to work. As far as vetting them, we're going to use the larger ones. So being a smaller firm, it's really let's try it out, see what our capabilities are, see how many of our current controls and processes that we've built migrate up to this efficiently, so that we're not trying to reinvent the wheel just for something new.
When you look at the bigger companies, there's a consolidation happening right now in the security marketplace, right? We see Palo Alto, Checkpoint. I think this morning the news broke out that Symantec might be getting bought out by Broadcom.
Yep.
Have you seen that?
I did, and then I think the joke was Intel bought McAfee, Intel sold McAfee, Broadcom buying Symantec. When are they selling Symantec?
We're seeing a lot of different acquisitions, different kind of movements happening in the landscape. We're seeing it in cloud security as well. I think Amazon has been, I think they just bought 2 firms just last week in cloud security firms. I forgot the names. I read it, but I'm still a bit jet lagged, and I've been traveling way too much over the last few weeks to really have my memory be as sharp as it needs to be in remembering that. Does one cloud organization's focus on security and having internal tools to support you in that environment, does that increase their chances of winning your business, or do you look at it kind of and I'm putting all my eggs in one basket?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be more the eggs in a basket type. We're not going to have super flexibility. I mean, we're going to leverage other enterprise agreements and things that we have and use those types of cloud environments for us. It's not like we're going to go find some niche player that's like, oh man, these guys really got it together, because it has to be sustainable. And it's really, we're coming kind of on the tail end of what's being offered, not being able to dictate what we want offered to us.
Recent breaches have all been pretty much supply chain. A lot of the intrusions, a lot of the breaches that we read about have all been kind of, supply chain, but they've also created a lot of lessons learned. Is there any breach that you specifically look at, and then that you learn from, that you say there's some great takeaways from this specific breach over others? Mm-hmm. Do you have something where you go, this is my use case?
Yeah, well, yeah. I think, you try and learn from every one of them,
right?
Because you don't want to be the next one. A lot of times you kind of learn what happened, but not really how it happened, and even the underlying of really why it happened. So you don't really know everything, but you try and get as much as possible. The one that kind of sticks out to me is the Equifax one. Uh-huh. It seems like before, and this is just from reading public knowledge and things like that, it seems like before security wasn't really enabled, so it kind of created a culture of security's on the back burner. It's not really something that we're going to advocate for and let them do what they need to do. That then happened. The new model now, the CISO reports directly to the CEO. So I think from that breach, it's bringing the focus of security is not just an IT niche. It's something that is company-wide. It's something that has visibility and accountability too, because at the direct report to the CEO level, the CISO is going to be accountable for security, but he has to be empowered to be accountable. So that when you put things in place, when you do make decisions, you're sitting there and you're saying you have the buy-in from the stakeholders at the top level, so that you're able to, effectively manage things.
One of the fascinating things you brought up Equifax, and I think a lot of people look at Equifax as kind of being, I don't want to be them. Mm-hmm. I always come back and revert, and I was like, I don't want to be Marriott.
Yeah, acquire a company that had a breach going on for
and then have that breach
years.
Impact you.
Yeah.
I mean, and it was the same exact breach, meaning no one bothered to, in the due diligence aspect of it, to just kind of go back and be like, have we had anyone scan it to make sure this doesn't exist?
Yeah, and I mean, some of that comes back to the business moving faster than the security's enabled to.
So let me cut you off there for a second, because you bring it up and you go, security, we're supposed to be enablers, right? How many security CISOs do you know? And I know what I just said is an oxymoron, how many security CISOs, but how many CISOs do you know that are real business enablers? Most of them are very kind of outside of the business. They're in a realm of saying sometimes more no than yeses.
Right.
So, I mean, part of that has to be our fault as CISOs, is it not?
Well, I think it's our job to try and break that mold and break through whatever ceiling there is, but it also has to come from the top down. Changing culture from the bottom is very, very difficult. You need a culture that's set at the top, and security should fit into that. So you need the stakeholders who are going to be able to affect those changes, to give the visibility and ability to affect things to security, and then security can be there. Now, yes, security can't sit in their corner and say, no, we're just going to lock it down. You have to do it on your own as a CISO. You have to learn the business. You have to learn the process. You have to communicate with the people to understand what they're trying to do, what their goals are, so that you can help advise them to do that in the most secure fashion.
There's an article, I think, on a website I was reading over the weekend that spoke of a survey that they did among CISOs about blackouts. Essentially, when stuff hits the wire, just disconnect all the cables. I can't believe we've reverted to that, I think, especially in today's age. Is that realistic?
It depends on who you're working for and how much is a blackout going to cost your business. If pulling the plug is going to cost you less than leaving it connected, then yeah, that's probably your incident response plan for that one right there.
Pull the plug.
If that's what it is. But that's why you need to have business impact analysis. You need to be integrated with risk. You need to understand what each scenario does. I make the point a lot where security is something that we need to enable, because I want to let our lawyers go and do business and make a bunch of money so that I can then take that money and spend it on cool toys. It's something that that's what I like doing, and I need to be able to do that. But if I sit there and say, no, you guys can't do this, you guys can't earn any money, that's not good for the company, that's not good for the department, that's not good for anybody personally.
You brought up early on the Equifax thing, the CISO reporting to the CEO. You report to a general counsel.
Mm-hmm.
What's the right reporting? Should it be based on industry?
It depends on the organization, because you can't just broadly label the stroke of an industry. Now, security is one of those things that crosses industries as well. There's a baseline that you need of everything, whether you're retail, manufacturing, legal, telecom, anything like that. There's a baseline there, and it depends on the organization. Definitely being able to be integrated with some type of risk function helps. But it really comes down to the visibility and the accountability, where you're able to affect change, where you're able to deliver actual knowledge, and get that knowledge that you're delivering understood. So at the law firm, reporting to the general counsel is great. I think it's a good process. Maybe some organizations where IT is a heavy focus, it still does work there, but you need to be able to have honest conversations. That's really what it boils down to. So you can't sit there and say something, here's the way it is, and then somebody else is going to be like, okay, well, we're just going to sweep that away. So basically it comes down to whatever rung on the org chart that needs to be accountable is where the CISO needs to stand.
Can CEOs realistically manage a CISO, though? Because I feel like most CEOs are so worried about the business aspect. Mm-hmm. Security doesn't really kind of imply, and then very few organizations verticalize security. Most of them silo it, put it in a corner, mm-hmm. say, hey, you're responsible for securing everything, but you're siloed. You're kind of your own silo. Is it realistic to think that in the future all CISOs will report to CEOs?
I don't know if the future that's where it is, but I think it's definitely possible. I mean, a CEO is the captain of the ship, right?
Right.
I mean, the COO, the CTO, the CFO. I mean, not every CFO is an expert in every one of those verticals, just like they're probably not an expert in security. But you have to trust your people, right? That's why you put good people in place. You don't want a team that you can't trust, and you're going to have a CISO that says, okay, deliver me this message the way I need to hear it as the CEO so that I can put it into my overall strategy, get it to the board, with your help, of course, to align it with what the CFO wants to do, what the COO wants to do, what the CIO, the CTO, all the other chiefs. It all has to be one cohesive program.
So I was meeting with a group of board members that sit on various boards all over the country. One of them thought that CISOs should report directly to the board and to no executive leadership within an organization.
It's
Positive, or would you want to do that?
I'm up for the challenge. Yeah, I mean, again, it depends on the org, depends on the board, and CISOs coming from kind of a technology field, can you speak CEO, right? Speaking CEO is still different than speaking board. So how do you affect your message to the board if you're going to be directly there? And every board's different depending on the size of the company, things like that. So some boards have people that get it, people that care about it, and you get a great advocate, and it's not that difficult. Some boards look at you with a third eye and are like, why am I even hearing about
who
this?
are you?
Yeah, so I don't know what CISOs report directly to the board now.
So I don't think there's any. The board member that the group of people I was with and the board member that was talking about it felt like you have an audit committee within the board.
Right.
And his thought process, this is a person who's a very veteran, very well known. I won't say who he is at a privacy, because he kind of trusts me with that, and I don't want to throw him under the bus and have him field a bunch of questions over it. But he brought up, in his point of view, he said, when the board carries the risk in the business direction, he goes, and a CISO is intertwined within organizational politics. Mm-hmm. So whether he reports to the CEO or the CIO or the general counsel, you're kind of intertwined in organizational politics. So you're always kind of threading that line of, I still got to work with these guys. I got to report to the board. But if I'm reporting directly to the board, I got to be very careful not to throw everyone else under the bus, because tomorrow morning.
Right. I mean, that's any role you're going to have.
Right.
With the audit committee, you're basically, what are you auditing? You're auditing your policies, what you said you were going to do. So if you said you were going to do it, if the board has sponsored that policy of here's how we're going to do it, and somebody's not doing it, yeah, it needs to be addressed. You can't just ignore problems. Now, there's many reasons why that couldn't be done. Maybe that person who didn't get that thing done has some other challenges that you can help remove those roadblocks for. So maybe it could be a good thing. I don't view it as throwing people under the bus. It's really just problem solving and trying to figure out what is in the way to make everything work better.
We talk about the zero trust model. I think that's a buzzword. I don't think it's realistic. I feel like, you work in a law firm, you trust people. You can't have a zero trust model in a law firm with lawyers who are people, because they're not machines. The paralegals aren't machines. The secretaries aren't machines. The vendors aren't machines. You're in a service business, and a service business is a people business. It's not a IT business or a SaaS business or a cloud business. Is it realistic? Can this be a realistic approach to security over a long term?
Maybe. Now, no. There's maybe a handful of organizations that can achieve zero trust, and as a law firm, we're not anywhere close. There's a lot of people that are nowhere close. It's a good concept, and concepts and frameworks, maybe you pick the things that you can do and at least try and make yourself better that way. But yeah, zero trust needs incredible buy-in from the top of the organization to begin with. It needs funding, it needs processes, it needs to have everybody working together to make that actually happen. And based on what we've talked about, there's different agendas, there's different people, there's different interactions. Yeah, it probably can be done, but for most of the businesses, it's not achievable now or really any time in the future. Maybe some things change. Maybe there's somebody out there that has some great technology or some idea that can flip stuff. But from what we see now, it's a very, very long shot.
I feel like that's one of those, zero trust is a buzzword, but I feel like it also turns off people in an organization. And you see that. I've spoken to different people within larger companies where the CISOs talk about, we're going to employ the zero trust model. And you become that guy in the organization that doesn't trust anyone. I feel like that's almost counterintuitive to security.
Right. You're walking around with your own tinfoil hat on because you don't trust anything.
You're like, stay away.
Yeah, exactly.
You! Right. I mean, It seems like it creates the human barrier that's needed in order for security to be successful. Because a lot of times, as CISOs, everyone's kind of looking at you to be the leader of security, and you're responsible for it, but you really can't do it on your own. Like you said at the very beginning, something very, very smart is you can't be a lone wolf in the security game. You got to have people within your team, but you got to have evangelists and ambassadors and different people within the organizations that really care about security. And you personalize it. You gave that perfect example where you said, hey, I went to my lawyers and I started saying, what if that was your data, your customer? What if it happened to you? You're really personalizing it, which makes it a human to human approach. So people will pay attention for it because they like you. They want to help you do your job better. And I feel like the zero trust model is kind of counterintuitive to
Well, and
that.
How do you, zero trust, how deep do you go? Are you zero trusting of people? Are you going to zero trust assets? Are you going to zero trust different types of data, right? Is each data object just going to be one thing that doesn't trust anything else? So that's kind of the framework where it's like, can this be applied at different levels? If you're going to go to a zero trust model, I mean, DoD, top secret information, that's a lot of zero trust type of things right now. But at a business-based level, you still have to be able to make things flow and earn yourselves money. So yeah, maybe it's okay, I'm going to zero trust these assets until they need that data because I can employ some type of technology, right? And still, that's even far away. But a true zero trust, as it's kind of been evangelized and theorized, is really difficult.
I find that you brought up a very good point because you brought up government. And I get why government should have zero trust. We have Chelsea Manning. We have Edward Snowden. Those are people who were trusted, who betrayed their...
And the role of any government is to protect its people, right? So they have to do that at the base.
That's kind of in their motto. That's in their description and definition. As a kind of, I like to say a new CISO because you've been in your role for about 3.5 years, really. And we see the shortage of security professionals in the industry. Obviously, that's a talking point everywhere you go. How do we get more people in cyber? How do we get more people in cyber? I find it really interesting because I hear people saying, how do we get more people in cyber? Yet I see more people being laid off and taking them 6 to 9 months to find a job in an industry where you're supposed to be overflowing with jobs. Misconception?
Yeah.
Challenge of picking the right role?
It's both ends. So it's people looking for these unicorns that have so much knowledge. Like, you see the jokes of like, okay, I want this person with, these 4 certs and this many years experience, and I'm only going to, pay them this much. And, it's like this stuff doesn't exist, right? Some certs, you need a certain level of experience to get.
Right.
So you can't require the cert with this experience. So it's a lot of putting the right job functions and roles in place. That's one of the things I said before, looking to hire people that want to solve problems, that want to work as a team, and then help them grow. That's where your processes come in place. Coming up through the consulting world, I didn't know everything right away, but you learn it. And then as you learn it, you teach other people, and that's how you grow knowledge. So there's a lot of people that look at security, it's a buzzword, and they sit there and say, oh wow, I see this all the time, I want to get into it. So how do you get into it? And they're like, okay, they'll ask you, I can learn, teach me. And you say, well, what do you want to know? And they're like, well, teach me to hack. And that's not really the way it works.
Right.
So they have to know what knowledge they want to gain, and that's how you can help grow people. You have open job roles. The roles have to be created correctly, and from a leader, you have to realize you're not going to get the perfect person every single time, because even if you did, everybody wants that perfect person, and unless you're, I guess Walmart's the largest public company.
Yep.
Maybe they spend the most on security or not, but unless you have deep pockets, like that person's going to be in higher demand. Then there's also we can't, people are looking for jobs because they haven't focused on what they want to do in security. There's a lot of layers in
Right.
security, and not everybody is going to be a CISO tomorrow. You got to learn where you need to grow and what path you need to take. And different people like different things. Some people like analyzing malware. Some people like compliance. Some people like writing policies. So you got to figure out what you want to do as a person, and then find the role that fits you, not just jumping at what rolls out there and like, oh, hey, this is security and I'm going to be able to, get on the computer and type really quickly and, the firewall's at 10%, 5%, we're in.
You brought up a really good point. Do you know who Chris Roberts is from Ativio?
I do.
He was in Israel, and we were all kind of in this room in this breakout, and someone put up a picture of hackers with hoodies, and the entire room went just absolutely mad, because it's stop putting hackers with hoodies on. Mm-hmm. Stop using that same kind of stereotype, and if you're in security, you should know better than that. And it feels like that's a lot of times what people are selling is, this, I want to learn how to hack. You hear that a lot.
Yeah.
We saw that. I see it all the time. You go talk to a university or a bunch of students. So what do you guys want to do in security? I want to learn how to hack.
Right. What are you going to do if you know how to hack?
Right.
Are you going to go to jail? Because hacking's illegal.
Right.
Right? Unless you have a statement of work saying, please do this to my network, what are you going to use that for? So, yeah, the hacker mentality of defending an adversary or finding attack vectors so that you can defend them, that's a good thing to have. But, a black hat is somebody who's doing something
bad.
That is, they're not
illegal.
supposed to be doing, right?
Yeah.
So it's a little bit weird. It's, a lot of Hollywood, a lot of things like that, where, what are you going to go spy on, your spouse? What are you going to do this? I mean, all that stuff has laws against it, and you're probably going to get yourself in trouble if that's all you want to do.
It feels like marketing has ruined some of the idea of hackers. To me, when I think of hackers, I think of people who look like you and me, who walk into an office building at 9 a.m. and go eat their cheese sandwich at noon, then go take a cigarette break at 3, and go about their day. They're normal people.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and what's a hacker? I mean, a hacker is somebody who's looking to figure out a process,
right,
to maybe improve it or break it down. I mean, it's really a mindset. A hacker is not somebody who just breaks into computer networks. I mean, you can go hack all sorts of things. I mean, you could be a mechanical person and go hack an engine to get, greater output and fuel efficiency. So, I mean, that's a hacker too.
That's a pretty good hack, though.
It is, right? But I'm sure people do that all the time.
All day long.
Yeah. So, sitting there and saying, okay, this is a hacker. This is what they do. The hoodie mentality. They sit there and they type on their computer and,
really, really fast.
Yeah. This is how quickly it works. It's just not true. I mean, when you look at any of this stuff, it takes time, and even when somebody is a hacker, if you're cybercom, right, and you're doing that as a profession, I mean, those things are going very meticulously, and
there's rules in place.
Yeah, exactly. There's
code of conduct.
Exactly, and there's processes that you have to follow to make sure you're doing it the right way, but all that knowledge that you've gained from learning those other processes and breaking them apart, that's really what a hacker is learning those processes and figuring out how to either make them better or where the holes are to achieve what goal you need.
Something you and I didn't talk about, but I'm going to drift there anyways. People confuse security with privacy. Mm-hmm. And we see the DPO role kind of for GDPR exist. We've seen the chief privacy officer role exist, and almost the need between the CISO and the chief privacy officer to kind of coordinate their efforts. Are we duplicating privacy and security? Should privacy be a subcategory under security? Should privacy still be on its own?
Privacy, I think, should be on its own. So you're right. They are different. Too many people lump them together.
Right.
Security is a way to enable privacy. So privacy is what, either somebody is or what you want to keep based on, your data classifications or things like that, different regulations, what you want to keep to the privileged people. Security can be an enabler of the privacy, but they are very, very different. Securing data needs to let it flow. Privacy is really keeping that stuff more closer to the vest of where it needs to stay.
With all the different kind of privacy laws that are now popping up state by state in the U.S., it's becoming a CISO nightmare almost. As you look ahead, I mean, if you've got a chief privacy officer in your organization, you're grim, and you being surrounded by a bunch of lawyers is also excellent. They're going to pretty much give you free advice on how to do this, right? But for other CISOs that are under-resourced, who end up wearing the privacy hat as well, because most organizations aren't, the immature organizations, I like to say, don't understand the difference between security and privacy. You end up not only having to comply with 50 different attorney generals for data breach notification, pretty soon you're going to have 50 different privacy laws. And as similar as they are, they're still different in one way or another. Is that a nightmare scenario? I mean, is this, are we headed towards a apocalypse of sorts when it comes to regulation and legislation?
I don't know if it gets better or worse. Yes, it is very difficult as more and more states come with their own stuff. You have to organize that because you got to make sure that you're not violating any laws or rules. Maybe if there is something consistent at a nation level, maybe it's better, but maybe it's not. It all depends on how it's implemented. If it's implemented correctly, great. If it's not implemented correctly, it could get even worse. So it really kind of remains to be seen.
Can you imagine California making you store California data in California and Ohio saying you got to store Ohio?
But that's what like Germany does now, or Switzerland. They say our data has to stay in our country. So at that global level, you have to deal with it. Maybe it's a little bit different at the more micro level of states versus countries, but some of that stuff is already out there. We talk about security roles and things like that, and people who need jobs. I mean, figure that stuff out. And if there's a lot of stuff to put together and a lot of stuff to organize, I mean, that's what people can do.
What are 3 tips you would give someone who's aspiring to be in security, or someone who's in security who's just getting started? What are some of the best practices you'd like to share with them?
One, learn by observation. So if you're in an organization, if you're in security, you're looking to get in there and you're in a meeting or you're copied on an email, figure out how that communication is going on. Learn that stuff there. And then pivoting off that, don't be afraid to ask questions, but know what you want to know. It goes back to the teach me how to hack. Well, why do you want to hack? You need to know what questions you're asking and what information you're looking to gain from those questions so that you can figure out what path you want to take. Adding on to that, everybody's always going to say scripting, programming, things like that. PowerShell, Python, that's great, but also learn Microsoft Office, because when you have to present ideas, and security is not just the ones and zeros, that's just a portion of it. When you're presenting to a board or an executive, you need to know PowerPoint. Excel is a great tool, right? And you could use your PowerShell and your Python to automate a lot of different data, and being able to present that data and information effectively to people, and basically taking that very heavy technology message and putting it into something that's personable and able to be understood. That's where real value comes in, because it helps you get ideas across, and it helps you move projects. It helps you, get things. It helps break down the barriers between the other departments, because if you're able to communicate things in ways they can understand, they're going to be a lot more likely to help you and work with you on the security front.
Anything else? One more?
One more?
One more? You got one more?
I don't know. I think that was 3. Overall in security, I mean, you have to be honest and consistent, no matter what level you're at. And the same message all the time. The consistency is really going to help, break down those barriers. Because if you're always saying the same thing, people are going to understand, yes, this is just the way it is. This is the message. We're not looking to avoid anything. Whether it's good or bad, just be honest about it. Things can be bad, but things can always be fixed. So you always want to give it better, right? That's the name of the game in security. We want to be better tomorrow than we were today. We want to be better today than we were yesterday. So we have to constantly improve. Nothing's going to get fixed overnight. It just needs to be moving in the right direction.
It's not the if, it's the when, right? And I always tell people who want to come into security, you got to be prepared for that dark day when that dark day happens. Mm-hmm. You are going to be in the middle of an incident at one point, and I feel like how you handle that incident also dictates your maturity when it comes to security. Mm-hmm. And most of the time when you hear people say, teach me, I want to learn, and we go to hacking or we go to firewalls or whatever, it feels like they miss out on the aspect which is the incident response piece of it, and just the operationalizing of the business and the operationalizing of security in the business, where you find that the talent isn't really there, the thought process isn't really there, and you end up with kind of one of the things I took away from Equifax, and you spoke about it earlier, was their incident response protocols were just not good. Mm-hmm. I felt like forget how long it took them to notify people of the breach. I think that to me that's for the attorney generals of the respective states to handle, because there are laws in place, and they from the moment they were notified of it to the moment they notified the general public, and that's all that is in court right now to be settled by a bunch of lawyers. But I felt like the way they handled it internally within their staff, and I think because we're Atlanta based and we know people that work at Equifax, mm-hmm. I felt like that's the biggest thing I took away from it, is they didn't really focus internally on their staff and their teams.
Right. And, I didn't work at Equifax. I know a couple people did, but that could be culture. Like, who really knows? And this is one of the things where these breaches happen, but you don't know the true underlying messages. And was this lax because people had thrown their hands up and said, look, this culture is never going to enable me to do this, so why am I going to waste my time, waste my effort, keep beating my head against the wall? Some people are more willing to beat their head against the wall than others. And, at some point, humans are going to get tired. Humans are going to, want to sit down and take a break. And if it's going to be that much of a struggle to get the security message across all the time, it's going to be more difficult to react when that dark day does happen. I don't know if I saw this on a poster or something, but it's like, a Navy SEAL saying of, we don't rise to the occasion, we fall to the level of our training. And when that does happen, what your culture is, what your processes are, what you're used to doing every day is how well you're going to react to something, because you've raised that floor to a certain level, not being like, oh, hey, it's game time, let's go turn this thing on right now. The stuff that we should have been doing when it was nice and calm, now we can do it when we're under fire. That's going to be completely, unachievable.
That's a great example, by the way. That was perfect. Thanks for being here today. I really do appreciate it. I know we've tried to do this for a while, and I'm glad you were able to kind of get away from your newborn and join us in the studio. This was really great to have you here. Thanks for sharing with us. If you're listening, make sure you subscribe, give us 5 stars, help us and keep getting our ranking going. I'm here with Carl Scaffidi, Baker Donelson, CISO. That's it for today's episode. We'll be back next week with more. Make sure you subscribe, follow, and share.